San Diego police say two teenagers killed three men at a mosque before killing themselves just a few blocks away.
One of the men killed was a security guard at the Islamic Center of San Diego. Investigators say the mother of one of the teenagers called police this morning to report her son missing and then eventually realized her weapons were missing as well. Now a hate crime investigation is underway.
3 innocent men gunned down in broad daylight at one of America's largest mosques, including a heroic security guard who saved countless lives. But when police searched the shooter's car, what they found turned this tragedy into a suspected hate crime. You're watching Case Signal, where we pull back the curtain on the crimes that shake communities and demand to be understood. If you've never been here before, subscribe now, because the stories we cover are the ones that reveal who we really are as a society, and what happens when the worst of humanity collides with the very best of it. This case is both of those things at once. This is the story of Amin Abdullah, a man who did not have to be a hero but chose to be one anyway and paid with his life. The Islamic Center of San Diego sits in the Claremont Mesa East neighborhood, a community of homes, apartment complexes, and strip malls dotted with Middle Eastern restaurants and markets. The center itself is the largest mosque in San Diego County. It opened its doors in 1989 and has since grown into far more than a house of worship. The facility houses the Rashid School, formerly known as the Islamic School of San Diego, where children as young as 5 years old attend classes in Arabic language, Islamic studies, and Quranic education. On any given weekday, dozens of children fill its classrooms. Families come to pray. Couples come to celebrate. Elders come to gather. For thousands of members of San Diego's Muslim community, the Islamic Center was one of the few places in the world where they felt fully, completely at home. Monday, May 18, 2026, was not an ordinary day on the Islamic calendar. It was the first day of Dhul Hijjah, the final and most sacred month in the Islamic year. For observant Muslims around the world, Dhul Hijjah marks the period of Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, and carries a spiritual weight unlike any other time. Families would have been arriving at the center with an elevated sense of occasion, of reverence. For the staff and worshippers who gathered that morning, this was a day set aside for something holy. Amin Abdullah had shown up for his shift as he always did. A security guard at the Islamic Center, Abdullah was a familiar and beloved presence there. Colleagues and regulars described him as warm, generous, and perpetually smiling, the kind of man who made people feel safe not just because of the uniform he wore but because of who he was. He was a father of 8 young children. 8. By all accounts, his family was the center of his universe and the Islamic Center was a close second. A community he served and protected with genuine devotion. Anis Faraj, a fellow security guard who had worked at the mosque off and on for more than a decade, told reporters that Amin Abdullah was exactly the kind of man you'd want standing between you and danger. Faraj himself had not been scheduled that day, a fact he would later describe with the somber gratitude of someone who knows how close fortune runs to tragedy. He said he had worked alongside Abdullah many times and had never experienced anything remotely like what happened that Monday morning. In all his years at the center, nothing had prepared anyone for what was coming. At 9:42 in the morning, 2 hours before the shooting began, the San Diego Police Department received a 911 call that, in hindsight, contained every warning sign of an imminent mass casualty event. The caller was a mother. Her teenage son, 17-year-old Cain Clark, was missing. So was her vehicle, a white BMW. So were several of her firearms. She told officers that her son was suicidal and that he was last seen wearing camouflage clothing. He was not alone. He had a companion with him. What the mother communicated to dispatchers that morning was alarming enough on its own. But the detail that changed everything, the detail that elevated the concern from a missing suicidal teenager to a potential threat to others, was the combination of factors. Suicidal. Camouflage. Multiple weapons. Not alone. San Diego Police Chief Scott Wahl would later explain that as his department's threat management unit began piecing together the picture from the call, the assessment of the situation kept growing darker. That began to trigger a larger threat assessment picture, Wahl said. Our threat management unit began to take the tips and leads that we had and utilize the technology we have available to us. They were racing to get in front of it. But they were not fast enough. At approximately 11:40 in the morning, the 2 teenagers arrived at the Islamic Center of San Diego. Cain Clark, 17 years old, and Caleb Vazquez, 18 years old, both from San Diego, were dressed in camouflage and carrying weapons taken from Clark's family home. What happened next unfolded with terrifying speed. Witnesses would later report that the young men carried out what appeared to be a drive-by shooting in the area before arriving at the mosque, targeting a landscaper who was working nearby. The landscaper was shot at but not struck. A bullet that appeared to have hit his helmet, deflecting the round. He survived. Moments later, the two teenagers were at the doors of the Islamic Center. It was here at the threshold of the center that Amin Abdullah saw them. A witness, Abdul Salim, who knew all three of the men who died that day, recounted what he was told of Abdullah's final moments. Whenever he saw the people, he said, "There's something strange. Close the doors." Those words, "close the doors," were among the last Amin Abdullah ever spoke on duty. He recognized the threat before the guns were raised. He acted. He moved toward the danger, doing what every instinct of self-preservation argues against, doing exactly what the job demands and what the moment required. The gunman opened fire. 3 men were killed outside the mosque. Amin Abdullah was one of them. The second victim was a man who worked in the center's food store. The third was a teacher named Mohamed Nader. Nader, according to those who knew him, had heard the gunfire from across the street where he lived. His wife was working inside the mosque. He ran toward the sound of the shooting to make sure she was safe. He did not survive. Inside the complex, the situation was rapidly unfolding. The mosque also houses the Bright Horizon Academy, the attached school where children from kindergarten through 3rd grade attend classes. There were dozens of young children inside those walls when the shots rang out. The Imam of the Islamic Center, Taha Hussein, was on the grounds. He would later describe the scene as an extremely painful and traumatic day for our congregation, students, staff, and the broader San Diego community. But in the immediate chaos, he managed to record and share a message that parents and community members desperately needed to hear. We are safe.
I wanted to send this message to the entire Muslim community in San Diego. Alhamdulillah, we are safe. The entire school is safe. All the kids, all the staff, and the teachers are safe out of the Islamic Center. We have few casualties, not confirmed yet.
What made that statement possible, what made those children safe, was what Amin Abdullah had done. San Diego Police Chief Scott Wahl addressed this directly at a press conference later that evening. He was deliberate in his words, choosing each one carefully. We do believe the security guard was able to help at least minimize the situation to the front area of the mosque, Wahl said. He went further. Authorities were still reviewing the specifics of Abdullah's response, Wahl acknowledged, but he was unequivocal about one thing. At this point, I think it's fair to say his actions were heroic.
At least minimize the situation to the front area of the mosque. But at this point, I think it's fair to say his actions were heroic, and undoubtedly he saved lives today.
And then the statement that cut through everything else that was said that day. Undoubtedly he saved lives today. Security guard. A father of 8. A man who showed up to work on the first day of the holiest month of the Islamic calendar and gave everything he had. At 11:43 a.m., the San Diego Police Department received its first 911 calls about an active shooter at the mosque. Officers were on the scene in under 4 minutes. Wahl described the response as dynamic, a term used in law enforcement to describe a fast, aggressive entry into a threat situation rather than a slower perimeter and contain approach. Up to 100 officers were ultimately deployed to the Islamic Center and its surrounding blocks. They moved through the mosque's prayer halls, swept its classrooms, cleared its corridors. They were searching for the 2 suspects who had already fled the scene. Aerial footage captured the image that would become one of the most striking and heartbreaking of the day. Dozens of young children hand in hand, being walked out of the school's parking lot by adults. An evacuation line winding through a scene surrounded by police vehicles. All of the kids are safe, Wahl said at an early press conference, his voice visibly strained. Our hearts go out to the families that are in this moment being notified of what has happened to their loved ones. The search for Cain Clark and Caleb Vazquez did not last long. At 12:43 p.m., police reported that the scene at the mosque was still active but contained. Less than a quarter mile from where the landscaper had been shot at, officers located a vehicle sitting in the middle of a street. It was the white BMW that Cain Clark's mother had reported missing that morning. Inside the car, both teenagers were found dead. Both appeared to have died from self-inflicted gunshot wounds. Authorities confirmed the threat was fully neutralized at 1:07 p.m. The investigation that followed would rapidly fill in the portrait of the two young men who had carried out the attack. Cain Clark, 17, had attended Kate Sessions Elementary School and the San Diego School of Creative and Performing Arts before his family enrolled him in an online schooling program called iHigh Virtual Academy in 2021. He had never physically attended Madison High School, the institution in whose attendance zone he lived, but he had participated in one meaningful activity there: wrestling. From 2024 to 2025, Clark had been a member of Madison High's wrestling team. The school's social media page had even congratulated him in January 2024 for taking first place at a tournament. He was on track to graduate at the end of the very month he carried out the attack. He had no disciplinary record to speak of, save for a single incident in elementary school in 2015, when he punched someone in the leg. Caleb Vazquez was 18 years old. Beyond his age and the confirmation of his identity from senior law enforcement officials and a federal law enforcement source, his background at the time of publication remained less publicly documented than Clark's. But together, the two young men had planned and executed an attack on a house of worship on one of Islam's most sacred days, a fact that was not lost on investigators or on the community. Inside the white BMW where the suspects were found, investigators discovered what they had suspected from the moment the call came in: anti-Islamic writings. A suicide note. The note contained writings about racial pride. And in perhaps the most chilling detail of all, the firearms used in the attack had hate speech physically written on their surfaces. Clark's mother had also revealed in that early morning call to police that she had discovered a note before reporting her son missing. A note that suggested he and his companion were together and were dressed in camouflage. The FBI's San Diego field office posted on X that it was aware of an active shooter incident at the Islamic Center of San Diego and is assisting our law enforcement partners and is assessing the situation. The Bureau joined the investigation alongside local and county law enforcement. San Diego Police Chief Wahl was direct. "We're going to be considering it a hate crime until it's not.
We're considering this a hate crime until it's not. And at this point, we're going to work closely with the FBI.
That designation, hate crime, carries with it a specific legal and investigative weight. It means the attack was motivated, at least in part, by bias against the victim's religion, race, or another protected characteristic. The evidence recovered at the scene appeared to confirm that motivation with disturbing clarity. Reaction from political and community leaders came quickly. California Governor Gavin Newsom addressed the Muslim community directly in a post on X, writing that hate had no place in California and pledging that the state stood with the San Diego Muslim community.
Hate has no home in San Diego. Islamophobia has no home in San Diego. An attack on any San Diegan is an attack on all San Diegans, and we will not stand for it.
Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs wrote that the Muslim community was not alone. New York City's police department, in a show of solidarity and precaution, announced the deployment of additional officers to mosques across New York City. The ripple effects of what happened at Claremont reached every corner of the country within hours. Imam Taha Hussain, the director of the Islamic Center of San Diego, addressed reporters at the afternoon press conference. He had just lived through one of the most harrowing days of his life. He pleaded with the public to meet what had happened with tolerance and love rather than more hate. "It is extremely outrageous to target a place of worship," he said. "People come to the Islamic Center to pray, to celebrate, to learn." He confirmed that the center would remain closed until further notice.
It is extremely outrageous to target a place of worship. Our Islamic Center is a place of worship. People come to the Islamic Center to pray, to celebrate, to learn. Not only Muslims, but we have people from all walks of life.
Islamic Center of San Diego is no stranger to targeted hostility. The mosque was the target of an attempted bombing on January 11, 1991, during a period of intense tensions tied to the Gulf War, a time when it also received a high volume of hateful phone calls. Decades later, the threat to this community had returned, this time with fatal consequences. The attack on May 18, 2026, did not happen in a vacuum. It landed in a broader national landscape in which, according to civil rights organizations tracking hate incidents, Islamophobic attacks had been on the rise. What happened at the Islamic Center of San Diego was the worst-case scenario that Muslim community leaders and security experts had warned about for years. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, social media filled with tributes to Amin Abdullah. Dozens of comments poured in, people who had known him from the center, from the neighborhood, from the community that grieved him. "The nicest man you'll ever meet," one commenter wrote. "May Allah bless you." Another called him a true hero who gave his life to protect others. A San Diego resident, speaking anonymously to CBS News just hours after the shooting, said he remembered Abdullah as a very nice man, having a smile with everybody. He said, "You could tell he was willing to do his job well." Police Chief Wahl, in the same press conference where he called Abdullah's actions heroic, also made a point that extended beyond the security guard. He spoke of the officers who had responded to the scene, running toward an active shooter situation without hesitation. "The heroic actions of the officers and deputies are beyond belief," Wahl said. "To run toward gunfire without asking questions is remarkable." But even in that acknowledgement, it was clear that Amin Abdullah had done something that preceded all of it. He had run toward the gunfire first, with no backup, no radio call for reinforcements, no assurance that help was coming. Just a man and a door he was trying to close. At the time of this publication, the investigation into the Islamic Center of San Diego shooting is active and ongoing. Because both suspects died at the scene of their own apparent self-inflicted gunshot wounds, there will be no trial, no courtroom confrontation, no public accounting before a jury. What there will be is an investigation by local law enforcement, by the FBI, and by federal hate crime prosecutors into the full scope of the planning, the ideology, the online activity, and any potential networks or influences that shaped two teenagers into the men who drove to a house of worship on a sacred morning and opened fire on the people inside. There will also be a reckoning with the timeline. The mother of Cain Clark called 911 at 9:42 in the morning. She told police her son was missing, suicidal, armed and dressed in camouflage. The shooting happened at 11:40. There was an hour and 58 minutes between the moment authorities were first alerted and the moment the first shots were fired. Chief Wahl acknowledged that his department's threat management unit had been working to get out in front of this as quickly as possible. The gap will be examined. The sequence of the information will be reconstructed. Whether anything could have been done differently in those 2 hours is a question that investigators, and the families of the dead, will be living with for a very long time. For the Muslim community of San Diego, and for Muslim communities across the United States, May 18, 2026 is now a date written in grief. It is a date that will be remembered in the same breath as other acts of faith-based mass violence. The 2019 Christchurch attacks in New Zealand, the 2019 Poway synagogue shooting just miles away from where Clark lived, the long and grim history of targeted attacks on places of worship that continues, despite every vigil, every statement, every call for tolerance. Claremont Mesa East will be remembered now not only as a neighborhood, but as a site of something that should never happen anywhere. But alongside all of that grief there is something else. Something that does not diminish the loss but exists alongside it with a kind of stubborn insistence. It is the image of Amin Abdullah. A man who came to work, saw something wrong, told someone to close the doors and stood his ground. It is the image of a line of children walking hand in hand out of a school they were able to leave because a man they trusted did his job perfectly in the worst possible moment. It is the voice of a police chief, a man trained to be measured, saying plainly and without qualification, "Undoubtedly he saved lives today." Amin Abdullah was a security guard. He was a father of 8. He was a member of a community that loved him and a community that will now grieve him alongside his children, alongside his family, alongside the 8 young lives that will grow up knowing their father gave everything he had on the first day of the holiest month of the year. He was not a soldier. He was not trained for war. He was a man at a gate who made a choice. That choice is what this story is about. Not the 2 young men with hate on their guns and a note about racial pride in their pocket. Not the horror of what they did. But the man who saw them coming and refused to step aside. Who, in the most human and most terrifying of moments, chose to protect someone else's children the same way he would have wanted someone to protect his own. The case remains under active investigation by the San Diego Police Department, the FBI, and federal authorities examining the shooting as a hate crime. No charges can be filed against the deceased suspects. The investigation continues. If this story moved you, if you believe that cases like this one deserve to be told with the weight they carry, subscribe to Case Signal. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember the name, Amin Abdullah. Because names like his deserve to outlast the news cycle.